Patel.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner. For the record, Brian Wallace, Commission Counsel, and with me is Lara Tesoro and Micah Carmody. Thank you. Sorry. This morning, Mr. Commissioner, we're here to hear from Dr. Laura Richards, who's the Regional Director of Science for DFO. This arises as a result of a ruling you made in November that we should give participants an opportunity to question Dr. Richards with respect to process issues relating to science and the management at DFO, and in particular with respect to a science workshop that occurred in September 2009 and subsequent advice that came from that. I would emphasize this is not intended to get into the substance of that advice. Those issues go directly to the scientific questions that are before you, and they have been and will continue to be dealt with in the substantive hearings on each of those issues. We are very tight for time. As always, I've advised participants that this matter will be dealt with today, and my proposal to them, and this of course is subject to your ultimate determination, my proposal to them is that I have pinched their time unrealistically and tried very hard to, and they've all agreed to try and deal with it in that sort of time frame, and they understand, I think, that in the event that we can't finish, my proposal will be that they anything that remains will have to be done by writing. With that in mind, I hope to complete my examination by the morning break. Canada will then have 45 minutes before I ask them to complete, followed by the Aquaculture Coalition, who has asked for 90 minutes and to whom I have said, please take 60. And Mr. McDade will be followed by Mr. Prowse for the province, who has, for whom I proposed 20 minutes, followed by the Conservation Coalition at 30 minutes. Those are all of the time estimates that we received ahead of time. We have since had indications and late notifications from the First Nations Coalition, the BC Salmon Farmers Association, and areas D and B that they may have some questions, and we'll just have to see how the day plays out for that, but it's going to be very difficult. With that in mind, perhaps we could start.
Doctor, may I remind you you're still under oath?
Thank you. Dr. Richards, if I may just go to your curriculum vitae quickly. You have a zoology PhD from UBC from 1982.
Yes, that's correct.
And you have been, you were appointed acting regional director of science in the Pacific region in 1998 and regional director in 2002, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you've held that position since?
That's correct.
Mr. Giles, could this be marked, please, as the next exhibit, the curriculum vitae of Laura Jean Richards?
It'll be exhibit 610.
Thank you. Dr. Richards, you have had an opportunity to review and amend a summary of anticipated evidence. Do you have that?
Yes, I have that in front of me.
Now, you've reviewed that, and will you adopt that as correct?
I think there are a few places where we may need to go for some clarifications that I have just in particular discussed with your counsel.
All right. I will ask questions about this. Why don't we just deal with those? The first one is at R.
Well, I'd like to clarify the process for these statements. These are something that is prepared by Commission Counsel. They're then given to me to give to the witness. The witness comments, and Commission Counsel accepts some comments and not other comments. This is not the evidence of this witness by any means. The kernel of it is there, but Mr. Wallace hasn't pursued. His first question was, do you adopt it as correct? It's not something that this witness has written, and it's not something, as she said, that she can agree to holus bolus. I don't think it's useful to go through line by line and have her identify where there's changes. It seems to me that the witness is here to answer questions that Mr. Wallace asks and not simply adopt something he's written.
Mr. Commissioner, there have been varying practices here. The purpose of this in my submission is to make this go as efficiently as possible. I accept that this document isn't the entirety of Dr. Richards' evidence. Indeed, a large part of the summary talks about issues on which she will be asked questions. But some of it is, I think, uncontentious, and it's evidence which we would like you to be able to rely on. So I'm not asking if it's complete, I'm asking if it's correct. And I intend to ask questions on large parts of it, but it's simply whether or not this can be, what's in here can stand as correct. So I will ask the witness to adopt this with whatever clarification she thinks is necessary, and have it marked as an exhibit. Thank you. Dr. Richards, I think you have a clarification you wish to make at paragraph R.
Yes, I did want to just clarify, first of all, my area of expertise. And what I'd like to say is, basically my background has been in data analysis, quantitative analysis of fisheries data, and stock assessment data. And in that context, I'm quite good at data analysis, but I'm not very good at disease. And for issues related to disease, I do rely very heavily on my staff and on their advice. And in this particular context, too, it says with particular expertise in preparing briefs. That's the wording of this is just a little bit unfortunate. And so I think it's more correct to say that I do rely heavily on input from my scientists, and that and I rely on their advice when I am preparing briefs.
Yes. So is it fair to say that you rely on your scientists for advice on disease and fish health issues, and your strength is in the data analysis?
That's correct.
Thank you. Is there any other portion of this you'd like to clarify?
I think we did.
At paragraph FF, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, paragraph FF, there is a typo there in that last line.
Yes. So
And
it should be February 17th.
It should be February 17th.
Thank you. With those two clarifications, can you adopt this as correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, I'd like to have this then marked as the next exhibit, the summary of anticipated evidence of Dr. Richards.
Exhibit number 611.
Dr. Richards, in September of 2009, am I correct that you, along with Mark Saunders, convened a science workshop as a result of the low sockeye return of that year?
Yeah, that's correct. Obviously, there was an intense amount of scientific interest in what had happened in 2009. And we wanted to bring staff together to really exchange views and begin to try to understand what might have happened. And as part of our process of just trying to work with staff and given the intense interest, we realized we needed to have a relatively large meeting to make sure we had different points of view on the table. And so, yes, that was a process that we undertook.
Thank you. And in the book in front of you, there are a number of tabs, which, for the record, are the same as the numbering of the exhibit list that we provided to participants. And at tab 1, Dr. Richards, you'll see, first of all, an email invitation, secondly, an agenda, and thirdly, a table that sets out a summary of hypothesis relating to the 2009 Fraser sockeye. Does that reflect are those the invitation, agenda, and summary prepared for that meeting?
Yes, I think the summary, I'm not sure it was prepared in advance. I can't recall precisely the timing here, but part of what happened at that meeting was to go through and to try to look and try to get evidence from the scientists on their views on some of these different hypotheses, and try to flesh that out. It was.
Thank you. So these are all prepared in conjunction with that meeting?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, could this be marked as the next exhibit, please? And this will be the invitation agenda and summary of hypotheses from the 2009 DFO workshop. The next exhibit I would take you to is number 2, which is at tab 2 in your binder, Dr. Richards. And this is a bundle, I'll call it, of material relating to various hypotheses. Have you had an opportunity to review that material?
I have verified that those were, in fact, presentations which were prepared for that meeting. I did not personally attend most of the meeting. I was there for the later part of that meeting, so I cannot personally verify that these were fully presented, but they were the information that was prepared for that meeting.
Thank you. May that material then prepared for the science workshop in September 2009 be marked as the next exhibit, please?
613.
I wonder if I might, Dr. Richards, now just take you to tab D of 2.
Just, sorry to interrupt, just a clarification on tab 2, there are documents A through H. Do you want those marked separately or as a single?
All is one exhibit.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can mark them as A through H if you like, but all with the same number.
Right.
Thanks. Thank you. Dr. Richard, if I could take you to tab D of 2, and this is on the second and third page of that document. There are, again, this is a summary of hypotheses, and then at page 2 and 3, there are items marked identified issues and things that might be worth looking into. And I wonder if looking at things that might be worth looking into, whether or not subsequent to the meeting, science staff have been assigned to look into those 6 issues.
Staff have been continuing. Obviously, staff have been extremely interested in this question of what happened, because it is a very interesting question from a scientific perspective. And so staff have been trying to do some follow-up on these areas as well as some other areas, so not just these areas.
Yeah.
I'd say in terms of follow-up, there was much more follow-up on some of the other hypotheses. These were some additional pieces of information where we thought we might be able to have some extra added value. But some of these are probably not all the sort of the main areas in which further investigations would be ongoing.
So these were thought to be of lesser interest?
Well, I mean, some of them are. There's very different ones. You've got a bit of a mix here of, I think the first 3 topics are, fairly small questions. The last 3 are fairly major questions.
The next document, Dr. Richards, I would take you to is entitled Update on Science Review 2009 Fraser Sockeye, which is at tab 3. Am I correct that that document was produced as a result of the workshop?
Yes, the workshop was sort of a starting point, and then following from that workshop, we did attempt to make some summaries and of the current situation. You know, this was really a bit of a work in progress. There were different versions of this document that were prepared and updated as we went along and tried to get more information. And so, you know, very much what you're seeing here is a bit of an evolution of scientific thinking on this whole topic, and that scientific thinking was evolving and has continued to evolve as we get more information on various pieces.
Yeah. And how was this update used subsequent to the meeting?
Well, I mean, as you know, one of the things that we did was that we used this to prepare a briefing note that we sent up eventually to the minister. But in addition to that, it was also used to brief staff, so that the scientific staff themselves who are working in one specific area would have some sense of the broader understanding and the broader scope of the issue, so that they could also be informed and think about work of their colleagues as they were doing and moving forward on their hypotheses. So we could try to be as integrated as possible. You know, generally in these kinds of situations, as I know you understand, there isn't simple answers. None of the stuff is simple, and we know that things are connected and linked, and therefore we need to have large teams that are starting to investigate some of these questions. And in order to do that efficiently and effectively, it's very important that we have that staff are knowledgeable about other areas of research and what others are doing, and so that they can use that information as they move forward and think about their own area of specialization.
Thank you. Just for the record, I note in tab 3 there is what appears to be a covering email to this document dated Thursday, November 12th, to you from Mark Saunders. Can you just confirm that that is the case?
Yes.
Mr. Commissioner, if I may, Mark, the covering email and the attached update as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit number 614.
You mentioned, Dr. Richards, the briefing notes, and I just will ask you a series of questions about those briefing notes and their genesis and what finally happened to them. And the first step in that process take you to the documents at tab 4. And this is an email that appears to be from you, dated October the 6th, to Mark Saunders. Subject draft BN. BN is briefing note. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then attached to that is a document entitled Briefing Note for the Minister, Factors Affecting the 2009 Fraser Sockeye Returns. Am I correct that this is an early draft of the briefing note that you referred to a moment ago?
Yes, I think this is an early draft. The note was really drafted by Mark Saunders, and I think this is his first attempt to pull that together for an initial discussion between the two of us.
Thank you. Am I correct that ultimately there were, I think, 3 briefing notes prepared?
Yes, that's correct.
May I have that an early draft briefing note and the covering email marked as the next exhibit?
I don't have an objection to that, but I have a clarification. The very last page of that tab appears to be something different from the early draft of a briefing note. I'm suspecting that there was a photocopying error, but I wonder if and that photocopying error, if that be the case, might have happened before it got to the commission or after. I don't know, but it's a page that starts with speaking points,
yes,
which appears to have nothing to do with a briefing note.
Perhaps I could clarify. We have a normal template for preparing briefing notes that Mr. Saunders would have used, and that normal template, and this bit is just part of that normal template. It's not relevant for this particular case, but since this was a very, very early draft, he was just working from the template, and that was not removed when he did this work.
Thank you. Sorry, that could be marked as the next exhibit, Mr. Giles, thanks.
615.
And the next tab, Dr. Richards, I'm going to take you to what I believe to be the final version of this and the other briefing notes. And if I could ask you to look at tab 5 of your book. And this is a series of documents. The first one is dated March 02 of 2010, headed Memorandum for the Minister, Potential Causes of Poor Returns of Fraser River Sockeye Salmon with focus on sea lice impacts. And then behind that is a similar document, but dated December 3 of 2009, headed Factors Affecting the 2009 Fraser Sockeye Return, and the third document dated December 11th, 2009, also described as a memorandum for the minister, headed Potential Causes of Poor Returns of Fraser River Sockeye Salmon with focus on disease-related factors. Now, am I correct that you've looked into this and you've determined that these are the forms of the 3 memoranda that you spoke of that finally went to the minister's office?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Giles, could these 3 documents together be marked as the next exhibit?
Exhibit number 616.
Thank you. Now, going to the second of those 2 documents within that exhibit, we have the document headed Factors Affecting the 2009 Fraser Sockeye Return, dated December the 3rd. And am I correct that that is the final version of the document that we saw in its preliminary version at the previous exhibit?
Yes, that's correct.
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, just on a housekeeping matter, I wonder, it seems to me to make a lot more sense that these 3 memos, which were prepared at different times and in different ways, be marked separately as exhibits.
Would you provide your name, please?
Greg McDade for Dr. Morton.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, these 3 documents were all found as one group and perhaps Dr. Richards can explain the system of tracking documents.
I think to accommodate Mr. McDade, why don't they just get marked 616 A, B, and C?
That is satisfactory to me. The order, I think we should leave them in the order they were found, even though that is neither chronological or topical, but it's the way they were found. So the exhibit A will be the March 02 of 2010. B will be the document of December 3, 2009. And C will be the document of December 11, 2009.
What these are, Mr. Commissioner, and I believe this is uncontentious as between Mr. Wallace and I at least, is the first of those documents you can see is the latest in time, and the latest in time attached the 2 earlier briefing notes. Each briefing note is in a file, separate one from the other, but this latest briefing note had attached to it the earlier briefing notes for reference, and that's why it's in a package. But they really are independent documents, of course, and they now are independent exhibits as ABC within 616.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Wallace, I think best to maintain a sequence of the exhibits. We need to have identified 616 and then 616A and then 616B. Otherwise, we have a 616 that seems to be vanished.
Whatever.
So the ones you cited is the March 2nd document will be 616, which you previously had said 616A, so that would be
Yes.
616. B will be 616A, and the C document previously will be 616B.
And while we're making things
Thank you.
clean, why don't we also identify 616 as the document with focus on sea lice impacts, A as the document which is simply factors affecting Fraser River sockeye returns, and B being the document with a focus on disease-related factors. So with that, Dr. Richards, if we could look at 616A, which is the second document at the tab, I'd like to just briefly ask you to compare it to the original draft, the early draft of the same document, which is which is Exhibit 615. Now, in your summary of evidence, you indicated that the final version reflects a shift in the focus of the potential causes memorandum to the 2009 return, as opposed to possible causes for a long-term decline for Fraser sockeye. Can you explain why that change in focus occurred?
Well, to be honest, I'm having trouble remembering precisely all the details around this, but as I recollect, I think we wanted to keep the focus strictly on 2009 because we thought that was the area of most intense interest at this particular time. While these other factors were not, it's not that they weren't important, but when you're writing briefing notes, you need to be sort of concise and short. And we wanted to try to make it as simple and straightforward as possible, and that's why the focus was just on the 2009.
So was that a conclusion that it wouldn't be useful to the minister?
No,
to have a sense
no, I
of
don't mean to
long-term?
imply at all that it wouldn't be useful or it's not important information, but realistically, these briefing notes need to be very short, and you need to make some decisions about what is the most important piece. And at that time, obviously, the thing that was of most intense interest was what happened in 2009. So that's what we were trying to address.
Dr. Richards, is it correct? Am I correct that these three memoranda were prepared at the initiative of regional science and not at the request of the minister?
No, these were really prepared on my initiative.
And you have confirmed before, but just to reiterate, and you have determined by looking at tab Exhibit 616 and A and B that these were received by the minister's office.
Yes, to the best of my, yes.
Now, again, looking at 616A, this being the factors memorandum of December 3rd, 2009. At page 2, I want to just very briefly, if you could just confirm the genesis of the 10 factors that were set out on page 2 and how you came to this ordering.
Well, these factors were really, it came from discussions with staff after more discussion at that meeting that we just discussed in September, where we did try to come to some initial thinking on what was important or what was less important. And so this was really based on thinking by staff at the time, and we came to order them in this sort of way to try to make the story as clear as we could based on the information we had at that time.
And at that time, you determined that pollution in the Fraser, capture by Canadian fisheries, predation on juvenile salmon in the Strait of Georgia, and low food abundance in the Strait of Georgia were all unlikely to have contributed to the 2009 poor return.
That's correct. That's what we had at that time. Now, if you allow me to go on, I can say that some of our ideas obviously have evolved on these particular topics, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that later. And that does demonstrate that science and thinking on these topics does evolve. But this is where we were at this point in time.
And that's the point of this discussion. So that it's where you were at the time and what was communicated about that. The next bullet talks about factors that may have contributed to sockeye mortality, but not at a magnitude sufficient to explain the poor return in 2009. And there you have in that middle category predation by Humboldt squid, capture by U.S. fisheries, and mortality attributed to sea lice from fish farms in Discovery Passage, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you help me with the line between that bullet and the unlikely on the one side and the third bullet, which is factors that could possibly have led to the salmon sockeye mortality at the scale observed? How are those lines drawn, briefly?
Well, as I said, this was based on some early thinking around this, but I mean, these were areas where we thought, yes, it was likely that there could have been some predation. Certainly we had heard reports of things like Humboldt squid. So it's possible that we were thinking that it was very likely that there was some mortality of sockeye because of those factors. If the juvenile sockeye had gone out the Juan de Fuca route and come off the west coast of Vancouver Island, they would have encountered Humboldt squid. So that we know that Humboldt squid could have eaten sockeye. We didn't have great data on that, but we had some evidence. So it was our thinking that those were things that we just could not really rule out as possibilities, because there was some, we did think that yes, they could have led to some mortality, but we didn't at that time think that it could have been sufficiently large mortality to lead to the mortality, the actual scale that was observed.
And just to round this out, the three issues that the scientists concluded could possibly have led to the sockeye mortality of the scale observed are the toxic algal blooms in Georgia Strait, the low food abundance in Queen Charlotte Sound, and viral disease. Correct?
That's correct.
If I may take you to tab 6 of the next document. Here we have an email cover from Mark Saunders. You do not appear to be on this, but perhaps you have been able to confirm that this refers to the document attached, which is headed Brain Lesions Found in Southern BC Salmon Stocks. You're familiar with that document?
Yes, I am.
You were involved in its preparation?
Yes.
Sorry, you were involved in the preparation of that document?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Mr. Giles, could we mark this, please, as the next exhibit? A document, how do I, okay. It's a document entitled Brain Lesions Found in Southern BC Salmon Stocks.
Marked as Exhibit 617.
Sorry, with the covering email of December 9th, 2009. In the development of this document, it appears that this was that the Deputy Minister's office sought clarification from the region in the finalization of this document. Can you tell us what that clarification was? There also seems to be some question as to whether it was the Deputy Minister's office or the Assistant Deputy Minister's office, but perhaps you can clarify.
Yeah, the ADMO would refer to the office of the Assistant Deputy Minister, in this case, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Science.
Okay, so that's the reference to revised final per ADMO on the covering memo in this exhibit. Dr. Richards, that's
Yes.
with reference to ADMO?
Yes.
I'm not sure that this is significant, but at the bottom of the email, there's a reference to Judy received clarification from the Deputy Minister's office. Laura has approved these changes. Is that just a typo, or was the Deputy Minister involved as well?
No, I think this would have been from, that's probably a typo. Or it may have just been a lack of clarity of the understanding of the admin staff who are working on this.
Okay. Can you identify in this exhibit what the changes were that were made at the request of the Assistant Deputy Minister of Science?
Well, since I don't have the original, this wasn't on, I think, my email correspondence, and I wasn't on this email, I can't verify precisely, but if I look at this, it seems to be related to the first bullet, which would have been, and the intent of that first bullet really would have been to provide the context and then the linking with the other note that we just discussed. So my recollection here was really trying to improve the overall context in preparation of this note.
Okay. When you compare this exhibit with Exhibit 616 B, which is the last document at tab 5 in your book, there's a change in the title. Can you explain how this changed from brain lesions found in southern BC salmon stocks to the final title, which is potential causes of poor returns with a focus on disease-related factors?
I can't recall explicitly, but to the best of my recollection, my understanding here is, again, it has to do with context and linking it and improving the clarity. Because really the note was more than about the brain lesions piece of it. It was really trying to provide the broader context on at least one piece of the disease issue. So again, it was really trying to link and demonstrate sort of the flow in what we were doing.
Do you recall if that was a change that was proposed by the Assistant Deputy Minister's office?
I don't recall exactly where that proposal came from, but I guess I did agree that it made sense to. In my view, that was a helpful change because it did provide extra clarity in linking with the previous note and showing the flow of these ideas, because clearly there was a link between these concepts.
If I may take you then to the next tab, Dr. Richards, which is tab 7 of your book, which has an email of December 23rd, 2009, which is from Arlene Tompkins, addressed to you, attaching the briefing note. And again, this one entitled Potential Causes of Poor Returns of Fraser River Sockeye Salmon with Focus on Sea Lice Impacts. Can you confirm that this was an early draft of document, the first document at tab 5, which is now marked Exhibit 616?
Yes, that's correct.
May we mark this as the next exhibit, please?
Yes, it'll be marked as 618. Is that to include the attached email?
Yes.
Thank you.
The sea lice memorandum at Exhibit 618, tab 7, was approved by you as Regional Director of Science?
I'm not sure that is the final version. We've had so many different versions here.
Indeed, I think it's not the final version.
So it may not have been a version that I approved. I'm sorry, I can't.
If you go to the last page, the one I have doesn't have your, of Exhibit 618, tab 7. There is a transmittal slip there, but perhaps hasn't been signed in my version.
No, and they would have been, this would have been a standard template again that was used, so that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a version that I would have approved.
Thank you.
Mr. Wallace, I apologize for interrupting just for 2 points. I just wanted you to keep your eye on the clock because you're going to be finished by the break. The other matter is that you just answered Mr. Registrar that you wanted the email as part of the attachment to this exhibit. But as you just said, there's a transmittal slip as well in the tab I have, and whether you want to mark the transmittal slip as well.
Mr. Commissioner, I was including the transmittal slip as part of the document itself because they all have them, and the email is just a way in which it was conveyed. It's often the only way you can
I just want to make sure for the record that everything that's in the tab is described.
Thank you. For the record, then, just confirm that each of the memoranda has a transmittal slip attached to it. Am I correct? We just marked the draft of the initial draft of this, not necessarily the initial, the draft of the sea lice memorandum, and the attachment.
You marked the full document as 618, including the attachment and the transmittal link.
Thank you.
That's,
if I may ask you, Dr. Richards, the next document which I direct you to is a subsequent version of the same document, and that's at tab 8 of the book. And this one from the transmittal slip appears to have been approved by you as Regional Director Science, and also by Sue Farlinger as Regional Director FAM, and by Paul Sprout as the Regional Director General, correct?
I think just for clarity, the Sue Farlinger herself did not approve this. Those initials there are BA. That would have been Bonnie Ancliffe, who was acting in that position at that time.
Thank you.
And I can also see it says the top up, just for clarity, it looks like I've got some other initials other than Paul Sprout's there. So because this was happening right over the Christmas break, there were probably a number of people which were taking needed leave at that time, so there would have been some others who would have signed on their behalf.
Thank you for that clarification. So this document would have been a subsequent version of the document marked just previously.
Yes, that's correct.
Just comparing those two, if I could take you to page 2 of tab 7, the previous document. In that version, it says the impact of sea lice from commercial fish farms has been identified by various groups as possibly a major contributing factor to the low return of Fraser sockeye in 2009. And if you compare that to the version at tab 8, at the same place, it says various groups, including environmental organizations, have speculated that sea lice from commercial fish farms are a major contributing factor to the low returns of Fraser sockeye in 2009.
Mr. Wallace, you're ahead of at least Mr. Lunn and I. Where are you?
I think he's in tab 8.
Yes, I was comparing tab 7, which has been marked as an exhibit, with tab 8, which has not yet been marked.
Thank you.
Being the two successive versions of this memo. Are we all on the same page?
Yes, thank you, I see now.
Thank you. Dr. Richards, you see the difference in wording? I'm wondering if you...
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding exactly
Okay.
which bullets are you referring to?
The third bullet on the left-hand side of the screen, the third bullet on both sides of the screen. Do you recall the genesis of that change?
No, I'm sorry, I don't recall that specifically.
Was the change from...
I guess in my reading of it, I don't really see that they're that different.
Okay, you don't read any qualitative difference between identified and speculate?
Well, it says identified as a possible, and the other, so speculate versus identify as a... I'm not reading a large,
Okay.
I guess in my mind, I'm not reading a large difference between those two, but I cannot recall precisely the discussion around that.
Okay, thank you. Then, if I may, this document, which does not have an email with it, be marked as the next exhibit, please, Mr. Giles, along with its transmittal slip.
Exhibit 619.
Just for the record, so this is the briefing note at tab 8 that's now 619.
Correct. And if we can then go to tab 9, Dr. Richards, we have, starting with an email from Jean Landry, or Jean Landry.
Jean Landry.
Jean? Yes?
Yes.
And attached to that, we have another version of this same briefing memorandum. Can you tell me what this version, what changes are reflected in this version and where they came from?
My understanding going through this was that there was one sentence in the summary, the last sentence was added to this particular version, and that change was proposed by one of the staff members in the office of the Assistant Deputy Minister of Science, who would have been part of the review process of these notes.
Okay. So the one change would be the last sentence in the first bullet of the summary, the addition of the words, sea lice is not considered to be one of the three most likely factors, but is a high-profile issue.
Yes.
Correct. And that was proposed in national headquarters, not in the region, right?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace, in my tab 9, there are two summaries. Which one are you referring to?
I see only one summary.
Mr. Commissioner, I think again what's happened here is that the way these notes were prepared, the earlier note listing of all the factors was part of an attachment. So there in fact are two briefing notes within this, one of which was an attachment to the note on the sea lice impacts.
Thank you. So the second document in the briefing note at tab 9 is the previous one we just saw.
It's the original one of the 10 factors.
Right.
Which in turn is referred to as an attachment at the bottom of the first briefing note, which is the one that you're focused on right now.
Thank you. So we have here then for the next exhibit the briefing note, the cover email from Jean Landry, along with the briefing note with the change noted in the summary and attached to that, we have the previous version. No?
No, the previous briefing
Oh,
note.
sorry, we have the factors, thank you. So we have the factors memorandum, I guess what we call the general memorandum, which is, deals with the 10 factors.
Marked as exhibit 620.
So, Dr. Richards, with these 3 memoranda, which are collected at, I think it's Exhibit 616 and A and B, and we've seen the genesis of them and through other predecessor documents. Am I correct that those are the only briefing memoranda that went to the minister's office as relating to the poor returns of the sockeye in 2009?
Yes, that is correct. Can I take the time to explain on why?
Yes, please.
Perhaps because I think that might be helpful. You know, I think what happened as we were going through this is that certainly the situation was changing, and at that time we were starting or thinking at that time about the workshop that was going to happen with the Pacific Salmon Commission. And so our focus shifted to working on the preparation for the Pacific Salmon Commission, and then looking at that as perhaps a more effective, more up-to-date, better compilation of the material, rather than just doing these sort of one-off sequences of briefing notes. So that's why we decided not to continue that particular path, but really to focus on another process, which was starting to happen at that time.
So, for example, 2 of the likely issues were low food abundance and toxic algal blooms, and I take it they weren't pursued because you abandoned this process for the
Well,
PSC
there's
process.
actually perhaps a couple of things going on here. First of all, the issue in terms of the toxic algae was not an area where Fisheries in Canada really has expertise. So that was not an area where we actually could make a contribution and provide extra additional information to feed into a note for the minister. So we probably would not have done that specifically. We would have perhaps the best we could have done would have been included the information that we gleaned in with additional information in a broader body of work. The issues on the food abundance that in I think Queen Charlotte Sound, I think around that time as well, our thinking was probably shifting to perhaps that was more the Strait of Georgia than Queen Charlotte Sound. There were some debates going on between the relative importance of Queen Charlotte Sound and the Strait of Georgia. So really, our thinking around that was starting to shift, and most of that information was pulled together for the Pacific Salmon Commission workshop, which happened in June of that year.
Thank you. And following the Pacific Salmon Commission workshop in June, am I correct that the DFO Science briefed the Deputy Minister in August of 2010?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, there was a briefing note that was prepared based on that workshop. Because that was done through the Pacific Salmon Commission, our organization gets a little bit more confusing. Within our regional organization, it's the policy sector which has the lead on things related to the Pacific Salmon Commission. So actually, the note was put up through the policy sector, but it was prepared by myself, Mark Saunders, and the science staff.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, there's a document which isn't included in the tab documents which we have circulated. It commences with a document headed Action Request from Allison Webb, Regional Director of Policy. And the subject is the PSC Workshop Report, Synthesis of Evidence from a Workshop on the Decline of Fraser River Sockeye. Is the briefing note attached to that, the briefing note to which you're referring?
Yes, that's correct.
I wonder if the action request and the September 21, 2010 briefing note to the Deputy Minister can be marked as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 621.
Did this note go to the Minister?
I believe that this was just prepared for the Deputy Minister.
The previous memoranda?
I'm sorry, no, I can't say that.
If I may take you to page 3 of this exhibit, under recommendations, next steps, it says that DFO will develop a research plan supplementing some of the suggestions in the report with other knowledge gaps relating to an improved understanding and forecasting ability. Has DFO developed that research plan?
We have begun to develop that plan. I think that we have certainly started to pull together information that was related to where we think the gaps are, what additional work we think should be done. We have done quite a bit of background work on it. We haven't finalized it in terms of a final plan. But subsequent to that, there has been some other discussion within the Pacific Salmon Commission about the next steps. And because part of the report also discussed the advice on how we would proceed with next steps. And that involved, I think, a couple of stage process. And the Salmon Commission has endorsed that process. And we are now looking at potentially some upcoming workshops to flesh this out further. That will be probably being held in perhaps June and September. I'm not sure precisely on the dates. But there has been a Canada-US team that's been set up to help formulate the tasks associated with that workshop. And it would be, the first one would really be aimed at working with different groups who are active in doing research or could contribute to research on this particular topic, and just try to do as much coordination as possible and try to think about how to bring that forward. And then it would be leading into probably a research plan or development of a plan that would be presented to the Pacific Salmon Commission. So there is more ongoing that's following from that.
Thank you. If I may move to another topic, at tab 10 of your binder, tab 11 of the binder, there's an email from Terry Davis on the subject of sample speeches and templates. Were you aware in October of 2009 of the request for regional subject matter experts to develop speeches for a possible House of Commons emergency debate as described in that email?
Yes, I was aware.
I wonder if this email may be marked as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 622.
And
So just the email?
thank you, Mr. Taylor. Attached to, let's make this cleaner, attached to the email and referred to in it is a draft of speaking notes for a member of Parliament. Are you familiar with this email and the attachment?
I am familiar with the email.
And the attached...
The attachment, yes, I have looked at this.
Yes. Thank you. Then if we may have the email marked as the next exhibit and the attachment with the letter A. In the email at page 2, it says the bottom line is that Parliamentary Affairs has asked for 80 minutes of speeches to be developed on a range of issues related to Pacific salmon for use by members of the government in the event of an emergency debate on Pacific salmon is called in the House of Commons. Do you think it's the role of DFO scientists to develop speeches for parliamentarians?
Well, that's certainly a bit of a leading question. I think the role of science is really to provide factual information, and that's what we do.
If you go to the next exhibit, next tab, Dr. Richards, you'll see an email chain. The top of it is an email from Diane Lake, and the subject matter is re-sample speeches and templates. Have you had an opportunity to review that email?
Yes, I have.
And in it, there's a reflection of concern about this sort of job for DFO scientists. You were aware that that concern was being expressed within DFO region?
I believe this email chain is from Paul Ryle, who's not part of the science organization. So this was the concern was being expressed perhaps more broadly than just in the science organization.
But
I certainly am aware, and I think we would have concerns if we were asked to prepare material that was really political in origin rather than factual and objective, because, as I said, our role is to provide factual, objective information.
yeah. So you were aware that these concerns were there, and you have in your mind quite firmly where the line comes. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. May I have the email exchange that I just referred to, headed with an email from Diane Lake, marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 623.
The next tab in the book, Dr. Richards, starts with an email from Allison Webb to you, subject sea lice speech. You're familiar with this email and the attached speaking notes?
Yes.
May these be marked, please, as the next exhibit.
624.
What was your involvement in the writing of this speech?
I was not involved in the writing of the speech. Allison did want to clarify with me the fact that the factual information, and that's the discussion I had on that.
Yeah. And the next tab starts with an email from Allison Webb to several people, and you're copied on it, Dr. Richards, entitled Revised Sea Lice Speech. Is this the version in which you had input?
I believe that these were pulled from my email, so this would have been a version, yes, which was copied to me, and we would have discussed. But as I said, my role here was really just to ensure that we had that the information was as factual as possible and as objective as possible, based on the best science we had at that time.
Do you wish it marked, Mr. Wallace?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Exhibit 625.
The next tab in the book, at tab 15, is covered with an email from Tom Robbins to you, entitled the Fraser River Sockeye Overview Document. Do you recognize this email and the attached speaking notes?
Yes, again, these were pulled directly from my email.
And what was your involvement in this, in these speaking notes?
I probably would have just discussed some of the factual evidence on this with Tom Robbins, who works in the for communications.
That's in the region?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
May this document, please, and the email covering it be marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 616, or 626, I'm sorry.
Dr. Richards, was this period of time in the fall of 2010 the only time you've been involved in speech writing for members of Parliament?
This is the only time that I have seen a request of this nature in my career.
And going then to the next tab, we have an email from Dr. Christy Miller Saunders to a number of people, including yourself, on the subject of a discussion on BC sockeye salmon and science issues. And this relates to, in it, you've reviewed this email?
Yes.
And just, if I may summarize, because we're running out of time, this relates to suggestions of the concerns about DFO staff participating in a Pacific Salmon Foundation series of meetings. Can you comment on that concern, please?
Okay, I think there's a few issues which are actually raised here, but if I can address that. This was at the time, I think you have to realize what was happening at that time was we had just found out about the establishment of a commission. We didn't know and have a lot of details about how that was going to operate, how that was going to work, what our rules or what was going to be expected of DFO and how we were supposed to operate in that kind of environment. And so I think there were some concerns about staff going and presenting it and talking to various groups, and then because we're not quite sure how that would interact with what was happening with the establishment of a commission and how that would lead into or perhaps compromise or just how that evidence would be used. So I think there was a decision made at that time that we would participate in our normal DFO processes, but we would not participate in external processes. And I say it was really related to the fact that the commission was just established and we're just trying to figure out effectively what the ground rules were.
When you say the commission, you mean this commission?
Yes, this commission.
I wonder if that email string headed with an email from Dr. Christy Miller Saunders could be marked as the next exhibit, please.
627.
There are still two tabs, I think, that you haven't marked.
There's one more, and it relates to the same line, so I think we can deal with it almost.
Am I mistaken that tab 10 was not marked?
That's correct.
All right. So which tab number are you on now?
Now at tab 17.
All right.
Dr. Richards, this is a similar line of it's an email from Dr. Miller Saunders, and in that there's a quote that Laura does not want me to attend any of the sockeye salmon workshops that are not run by DFO for fear that we will not be able to control the way the disease issue could be construed in the press. Can you comment on that concern?
Well, that's very much a misrepresentation. First of all, it was not my decision. It was that, in terms of the participation that I just said, that was a departmental decision. It was not my decision. I think we were not so concerned. I really, first of all, let me say, I think the work that Christy Miller is doing is incredible, exciting research that I think and the department has really wanted to fully support, and I do fully support that work. So if there's some impression here that I don't support that, that's completely false. What we were concerned about, however, is that there are processes that we need to operate within a government department, and one of those processes is you need to make sure that you don't surprise your boss. And in this context, we wanted to get a briefing note into the system so that we could give a heads up the line about some of her work. And we were probably delaying preparing that briefing note because she was continuing to get more and more information, and we wanted to make sure that when we did send up that briefing note, it was as accurate as possible and had as much information in it as possible. And so we were perhaps delaying getting that note because we were hoping we'd get some more information that we could include in the note, because I'm sure you appreciate that particular topic is one where there's been quite an evolution. We're really on the forefront. So in this context here, I think the issue was only that we wanted to get a note up so that we could, there'd be a process issue within the system. They would be informed before we were speaking publicly about it. You know, it's really a courtesy process issue that's standard within government operations. That was the issue.
Thank you, Dr. Richards. May this document then, the Dr. Saunders, Miller Saunders email November 4th be marked as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 628.
Would this be a convenient time
Yes,
for the
thank
break?
Hearing no recess for 15 minutes.